Welcome to my face palettes. So I am very much taken in by a good face palette. I don't think I can remember the last time I saw a face palette that didn't intrigue me at least a little bit. And because of that, you can see that I have accumulated quite a few of them. By my last count, I think I had 25 face palettes in my collection. So let's just go over them one by one and we'll see if I can talk myself into letting a few of these go. So really quickly, I wanted to give you guys my definition of a face palette, which is pretty simple. It's just any pre-built palette that includes at least 2 or more cheek products and may or may not also include eyeshadow products. So that includes little duos, it includes trios, it includes things with eyeshadows and without eyeshadows. The first one we're going to talk about is this one here. I have it flipped upside down because it is mirrored and I don't want to completely blind you. This is the Narcissist palette from Nars that came out a few years back. I remember picking it up I picked it up in store in Ulta. I grabbed it off of their clearance shelf for about $37, if my recollection is correct. And this is what she looks like. We have a matte, I suppose it would be a highlight shade or a setting powder, depending on your skin tone. This is what Nars calls a contour shade. It is, let's see, a contour blush in the shade Paloma. And this is the famous Nars Laguna. And then down here we have 4 blushes. Now, I remember when I first cracked this open and thought, oh my gosh, I will never use this. This does not look like something that I would enjoy or that would even really work on my skin tone, but it actually surprised me. It has much less of a white base than you would expect just looking at it in the pan, and I do find that it blends out to a very pretty pink on the skin. The rest of these blushes are also all very nice shades. I have enjoyed all of them. I think as far as face palettes go, this one is pretty near perfect for me because there is not a single miss in here. Really solid face palette. I very much enjoy it and will definitely be keeping this one. Let's see, I have 2 duos. I have 3 trios. So let's go over these little ones first. This one, this is pretty new in my collection. I picked this up at the beginning of 2024. This is Benefit's Hoola Treasure Island Bronzer and Blush Duo. It has Hoola Toasted and Krista in here. Now, obviously, Hoola Toasted is a very deep shade for me, but it has a really, really lovely red undertone that I find to be very flattering. It is definitely a summertime shade for me, and even in the summer, I do have to be somewhat light-handed. However, I do find that slightly red undertone to be very flattering, and I really do enjoy a nice peachy blush. This has just a very, very subtle golden sheen to it. Super pretty, especially with a little bit of a tan. I really enjoyed this duo this last summer, and I am looking forward to being able to use it again this coming summer. Hanging on to that one. This is a trio, I think. I think I can probably give this one up. This is the Cover FX, let's see, Custom Enhancer Palette. It has the shades Candlelight, Sunlight, and Blossom. All 3 of these are highlighters. I haven't got a ton of use out of it. I don't wear enough highlighter to justify an entire palette full of them. These are very pretty and very reflective. This one obviously is quite a bit too deep for me. Both of these work, but I just don't wear enough highlighter for this to be practical for me. And when I do reach for highlighter, I have others that I prefer just a little bit more. I think this is one that I can probably go ahead and pass on. Next, I have this Love Chica Duo from Natasha Denona. I will be perfectly honest, I purchased this for the packaging alone. I had this rolled into a project this year and enjoyed getting a little bit more use out of it. We've got this cream. I'm getting some of that Cover FX highlighter in there. This is very putty-like cream blush. I do find it very flattering on the skin. It's got this beautiful pinky peach, really, really pretty shade, and this really interesting duochrome highlight. This is not usually the type of highlight that I reach for when I'm using a highlight, but it is a lot of fun. It's got that, gosh, I don't even know how to describe that shade, to be honest, but I love it. I have really enjoyed this one. We all know that I bought it for the packaging. Sorry, not sorry. Definitely keeping this one. Here's one that I absolutely adore. This is the Ulta Beauty 3-in-1 Cheek Palette. It contains one of my favorite bronzers ever. Now, I picked this up. This is the one in Santorini Sun, but they used to have one that I think was Tahitian Sunset, and I remember picking that one up on the recommendation of Emily Noel and just falling in love with the tone of the bronzer. It has a beautiful baked bronzer, very neutral and slightly rosy bronzer. And you know how I feel about a slightly rosy bronzer. This one, it's so nice. I just really enjoy this so much. Now, the one that I had before this was very similar, not quite the same, but very similar. And I fully panned that bronzer. I think what happened is I dropped it. That's always a consideration with baked products like this. Everything shattered. Ended up having to toss it. So I do believe that they discontinued that shade. This was the replacement for it. I did not get as much use out of the blush or the highlight, especially because this highlight doesn't have as much warmth as I generally tend to prefer my highlights to have. It's a little bit on the icier side. I really do enjoy this mauve blush. I love this one every bit as much as I did that original shade. It is a beautiful formula, beautiful colors. If you're looking for a cheek palette with a cooler color story, this is a really, really nice one. I think this runs about $16 at Ulta last I checked. Really enjoy this, definitely hanging on to it. Another one from Natasha Denona. This is her My Dream Cheek Trio. I really enjoy this kind of deeper mauve blush. Really, really pretty. And now, given the fact that I don't wear a ton of highlight, I think 2 highlights in a palette is kind of overkill for me. But when it comes to highlights, these are some of the prettiest in my collection. These are just gorgeous, both of them. Do you see these ones are just a little bit smoother than that Cover FX was on the skin? Both of these are just beautiful. I enjoy them separately. I also enjoy them together. I am not a huge highlighter person, but I cannot fault these formulas or these colors. So beautiful. The whole palette is just gorgeous. Really, really enjoy this. Definitely hanging on to it. I suppose this one is a trio too. So we have two more trios. This is from Rea Rabde, and it is the On Your Face color and contour and color trio in the shade Coquette. So you know when Sephora rolled out of JCPenney's, and in that little spot where Sephora was, my JCPenney's brought in a bunch of other beauty products, a lot of brands that I was unfamiliar with, and I actually picked this up. I think this is a lot of people's nightmare simply because the pans here are so small. These are all cheek products. I am perfectly fine just pinching my brush and just dipping it in there, but I know that that is so frustrating for some people. So just calling that one out. This is another really, really lovely neutral bronzer. Gosh, that is just such a lovely shade. It is, again, much more of a summer shade for me. If I wanted to use this in the wintertime, I would have to be very careful and use a very light hand. But it does have that neutral undertone that I enjoy so much. It doesn't have that hint of rosiness that I feel like the Santorini Sun palette from Ulta has, but I do find that this more neutral undertone to be very flattering on my skin tone, summer or winter. This blush is also that peachy pink with a gold sheen that you will see this kind of shade repeat itself over and over in my collection. I just adore it. I love it. It's kind of funny because I don't love a lot of warmth anywhere else on my face, but when it comes to blush and highlight, I actually think I may prefer it. And this kind of peachy pink gold cheek is just right up my alley. The highlighter is also lovely. It's a little bit more on the subtle side than the other ones we've swatched so far, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not always in the mood for a super reflective highlight, and this one is a really nice one. Enjoy this very much. Gonna hang on to it. I actually thought that this was the cheek trio, but it is not. This is an eyeshadow quad. I know it's around here somewhere. Give me just a moment.
One eternity later.
Okay, well that is a little strange. I actually cannot find my Pat McGrath cheek trio. This is another one that's fairly new in my collection, but I have not used it for a few months at this point, and I have zero clue where it is. I'm gonna go ahead and throw up a picture of the palette. I went ahead and picked it up along with this palette here in an after holiday sale when Pat was getting rid of the rest of her holiday stock from 2023. I picked this particular trio because I knew from reviews that this was the most neutral bronzer in her collection. And if there's something that just ruins a bronzer for me, it is a bronzer that is too warm. So I really wanted to go for the more neutral option. However, her most neutral bronzer is also one of the lightest in her collection, and I do find this one to be a little bit frustrating because of the amount of building that I have to do for most of the year. So is it everything that I hoped it would be? No, not exactly. I really do enjoy Pat McGrath's powder formulas, and the bronzer is it's not perfect for me, but I don't think I'm quite ready to let this one go. I can see it possibly making an exit from my collection in the future, but I'm just not there yet. emotionally, not emotionally ready to let it go just yet. So those are all of my duos and trios. The next one I want to look at is this one. You guys may recognize this from a project pan that I did last year. This is the It Cosmetics It Girl Beauty Book. I've had this for quite a while. I love the packaging. I love the concept of this. I am really suckered in by an all-in-one palette, even though I know they are not the most practical thing because, again, generally speaking, I'm not going to be using every single product in the palette. The chances that any brand can create a really extensive palette where I am going to use and enjoy every single product is very, very slim. However, I have gotten quite a lot of use out of this particular palette. It is super grody on the inside. I apologize. Right here we had a pan of the pressed Bye Bye Under Eyes powder. I got this down to the pan and then it started to crumble away from the edges. And rather than pressing it into this same pan, I just emptied the remaining pieces into the little container of the loose version of that powder that I have and just crushed them up and incorporated it with the loose powder, and that has worked just fine for me. These creams up here, obviously I hit pan on the medium shade, really enjoyed that medium shade. These ones also saw some use. I'm not sure how I use that, to be honest. I may have used this as an eyeshadow base and this one more as a highlighting shade. They have gotten a little bit on the dry and sticky side at this point. They're definitely beyond their prime. I did get a fair bit of use out of the bronzer. You can no longer see the text that was originally on here. However, I do find that this bronzer is a little bit warm for my preferences. The next page of this palette is really kind of where it starts to fall apart a little bit for me. I have never enjoyed any of these cream products. They're not right for my skin tone. I don't enjoy the formula. I don't find them particularly long wearing. They all have that very saturated kind of fuchsia undertone that is just not flattering on my cool olive undertone. It's just not. I have never enjoyed any of these. Likewise, I am not the hugest fan of this very vivid pink duochrome highlighter. It's also not my favorite formula. I found the cream formula to just be a little bit sticky and uncomfortable. That fuchsia undertone carries into this blush. This is not my favorite shade of blush. I have on occasion used the highlight, which I actually do find to be very pretty, and among highlights to be very smoothing and flattering on texture. That is the only part of this page in this book that I really found useful at all. The last page of this book got a little bit more use from me than these creams, but It Cosmetics still just isn't my go-to formula for eyeshadows. They swatch pretty well, but I do find them to be just a little underwhelming on the eyes. These two here are so similar. I don't know why they both needed to be in there. I mean, can you tell a difference? Can you tell which one is which? I can't. This one was meant as a powder liner. I have used that a fair amount. This one was meant for the brows. I never used it for the brows simply because it's not right for my eyebrows. But this, I found this one to be actually quite a nice contouring shade. I also found this one useful and this one as well. This one is supposed to be used as a base for the other eyeshadows, but I find that just makes these eyeshadows weaker on the eyes, which is, generally speaking, not what I'm going for. If you are afraid of too much pigment and too much impact, I could see how that might be useful, but I never used it in that way. In any case, this was definitely a very hit or miss product for me. I did enjoy the convenience of the cheek products. I enjoyed the eyeliner, but obviously the majority of the product that came in this palette just was not useful to me. And I've been hanging on to this palette for quite a long time, hoping that I can make more of a dent in it. But to be perfectly honest, this palette is pretty old at this point, and what's left in here is the stuff that is less useful to me, and I don't see it becoming more useful to me in the future. I think it is time that I decluttered this one. Here's another one that disappointed me a little bit, and by a little bit I mean quite a lot. This is the Makeup Forever HD Skin Palette. This is the lighter of the two that they sell. I remember when this came out, I saw it and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't imagine a better little travel palette than this. Where this really fell down for me was I found the texture of these cream products to be very heavy on my skin, especially over time as my oils kind of started to seep through and mix with the product. It just looked incredibly makeup-y on my skin. Now there are some exceptions here, and one of them is this Peachy Under Eye Corrector. I think this one is one of the more hydrating under eye correctors that I have. And I think on that particular part of my face, my under eye, this was a lot more flattering than the creams were on the rest of my face. I also do find both of these blushes to actually be quite pretty as well. A little bit more sheer than I initially expected, but still very pretty and didn't have that very heavy texturized look that I disliked so much in the skin tone based products. This is another thing that irritates me about cream palettes, is just how grody they look after just a handful of uses. Unfortunately for me, both of these bronzer / contour shades, I'm not sure what they're intended to be, but they are far too warm on me. If I blend it out, I think you can see just the really strong yellow undertone of both of those, and it's just not right for my skin tone. I also found this highlighter to be awfully goopy. And one of the reasons why I initially picked this up is because I heard that this was the same formula as the Makeup Forever HD cream foundation sticks that used to be all the rage, and there were so many people who loved those foundation sticks. And I love the concept of this little palette so much that I went ahead and gave it a try. And I'm not gonna lie, it turned out to be a pretty expensive mistake. Now, am I going to declutter it? I don't think I am, for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think I spent something like $85 on this, which to me now is just wild. I don't know what was going on in my life at the moment where this was something that I felt like would be worth it for me for $85, but there still are about 3 or 4 products in this palette that I do find usable. I will admit that I'm probably being a little bit swayed by how painful it would be for me to declutter something that was this expensive, regardless of its usefulness to me. But yeah, I think I'm going to hang on to this one a little while longer and see if I can get a little bit more use out of these products that do work on my skin. Here's another one that was wildly expensive, and again, I don't know what possessed me to purchase this one. This is the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Edit. This is the Ghost palette, was one of those holiday palettes that was released some years ago. I have hit pan on the bronzer. You can see the little waffle pan that's underneath these baked shades. During the winter time, I like to mix the two of these shades together to get a little bit more of a lighter bronzer. I do find this tone of bronzer to be very flattering. Now, I think the drawback of this palette for me is that these 3 up here, I don't use a ton on their own. And I use them mostly just to augment or modify these shades down here. So I don't know if that's 100% worth my money, but I have really, really enjoyed this palette. I would not mind, it is getting a little older in my collection. I would not mind finishing it up. That might be a goal for me this coming year. I do really enjoy the Hourglass formula, both in their finishing powder and their bronzer and blushes. Funny story about this highlighter. I never touched this highlighter because I remember it being incredibly sparkly. And it wasn't until I saw Ruth Foley, she was doing a video talking about this product, and I watched her discover on camera that there was a sparkly overspray on this highlighter, that once she was able to get past that overspray, what was left was this really beautiful, softly luminescent highlighter that just had that candlelit glow we kind of associate with Hourglass, with no sparkle whatsoever. And I remember pausing the video, running back to my room, getting out this palette and rubbing off the overspray. And wouldn't you know it, she was right. It is a really, really soft, very subtle, beautiful highlighter with 0 sparkle. I don't know why they feel the need to put that overspray in. I'm thinking it's because in the palette it looks very attractive that way underneath store lighting, but I don't know. I really wish that companies wouldn't do that, because I had this sitting in my collection for a while before I even realized that it was usable for me, because I'm very much not about a sparkly highlight. Anyway, I was very pleased to find out that this is a lot more usable than I expected it to be. I have since then mostly used it to mix in with these blushes to give it a little bit more of that really soft luminosity, and I have really enjoyed it in that way. Overall, I really do enjoy this palette, and I have taken it traveling with me many times. It is getting a little bit older though, so I need to consider really putting some effort into completely panning this one, maybe in the coming year. It might be a 2025 project for me. Next I have here, this is my very, very first Pat McGrath product, my first Pat McGrath experience. This is her, let's see, what is it called? Divine Blush and Glow Cheek Palette in the shade Nude Venus. These are 4 matte blushes, all of which are just gorgeous. These are just beautiful, beautiful blushes. And they are paired with one of the most ethereal and divine highlighters I have ever. Gosh, it is so pretty. Now, I don't wear this highlighter very often on its own. My preference is to use it to turn these matte blushes into something with a little more luminosity. I really enjoy using it that way. But I remember when I first got this and I put it on my cheeks and I just looked at myself in the mirror and went, because it was just so pretty. This is really kind of what kicked off my love affair with Pat McGrath. Is her pricing wild? Absolutely. Are her color stories somewhat predictable? Definitely. Do they make me feel beautiful? 100%. Pat McGrath products they make me feel like a princess. Now, I can't vouch for whether that is an effect of the packaging, the presentation, the products themselves, the color choices, or some combination of all of them, but it is what it is. I feel special when I use Pat McGrath products, and I admit I am willing to pay a slightly higher price tag for that experience. That said, the majority of my Pat McGrath products I have gotten steeply discounted because, again, Mother is expensive and I only have so much discretionary money in my budget. I think I picked this one up from the Sephora sales section. And to be honest, for me personally, it was worth every penny. I know your mileage may vary, but I love this palette. Definitely hanging on to this one. Here is another Pat McGrath product that I got. I can't remember how much I paid for this, but I ended up finding it in TJ Maxx. I know the packaging is a little bit divisive. I find it incredibly pretty and also very frustrating to store. Two things can be true at the same time. This is beautiful. It is really annoying to try to store. However, inside it is one of my favorite Pat McGrath products of all time, and it is this blush right here. Now, all 3 of these blushes have the same formula. It is this beautiful, glowy, baked blush. This peachy one here is my favorite. It is such a soft, smooth, gorgeous blush. I am never unhappy with this blush here. This one is a little bit more on the vibrant side for me, but I find that with a really light hand, this one can be really pretty just on the apples of the cheeks. I wish this formula was present in her permanent lineup. This one is also very pretty. I have to use a pretty light hand with this one, but these are all just gorgeous blushes and they have that beautiful soft glow. I am a sucker for a glowy blush, and these are some of the best that are in my collection. Now, there is one product in here that I just rarely touch at all, and it is this highlighter up here, and that is simply because I just find this to be very sparkly, and I'm not much of a highlight person to begin with. How many times have I said that? Rebecca, you don't need to keep saying that, but I do find this one to be a little bit sparkly for my preference. This might be a nice kind of shoulders and collarbone type of highlight though. That might be the way I could get through a little bit more of this product up here because it's barely touched. In any case, these are baked products. They're very highly pigmented. It's going to take me 3,000 years to get through any one of these. This is the one I've used the most. I still haven't even flattened out the dome very much at all. So I'm going to be working on this forever, but I don't mind. Love this palette enough to forgive the bulkiness of the packaging. Okay, since we're on this Pat McGrath kick, we might as well look at the last one here. This one, along with the cheek trio that we talked about earlier and a quint that I bought last year, this is one of the newest products from Pat McGrath in my collection. I picked this one up after the holiday. I never buy the holiday collection items during the holiday because I know she tends to dump a lot of her stock after the holiday, and I am a little embarrassed to admit that I have only used this maybe 3 times since I picked it up, which is criminal to me. I really did enjoy it the few times that I used it, but I spent so much of my time this last year working on older products that I was trying to pan that I really kind of neglected some of my newer things. And I'm just dying to spend a little bit more time playing with this one and a few other of the newer products in my collection that kind of got pushed to the side while I focused on panning older products. I don't regret that I spent that time on those older products because quite a few of them were products that were definitely going to age out of my collection, and I wanted to get some additional use on them before they had to go. But yeah, I really would like to spend a little more quality time with this palette in particular. Definitely hanging on to this one. Okay, here is one that I'm a little bit conflicted about. I think I picked this one up on clearance from Ulta for about $15. And I picked it up because I remembered Emily Noel raving about the formula of these really, really glowy blushes. I think at full price, this was closer to $40. And so when I saw it for $15, I couldn't say no, especially with how much Emily had just raved about this. Now, I'm really glad that I got it for the discount that I got it for, because the only blush in here that I really do enjoy is this one. I told you we were going to see this a lot. See this peachy pink color with a little bit of a gold shift in there? This is a beautiful, very glowy blush, and I adore it. I think it looks gorgeous on the cheeks. It's very much along the lines of the Drop of the Hat by ColourPop or the Milani Luminoso blush, and so I do really, really enjoy it. These ones here, though, I find them on the cheeks, they show up on me weirdly ashy. They end up looking on me like highlighters that I've put in the wrong place and that are not quite the right tone for me. They're all too dark to be considered highlights on me, and they just don't work as a blush. So I have been hanging on to this whole palette just for this blush here because I enjoy it so much. I don't know, listen, as pretty as this one is, and I do really enjoy it, it's not wildly unique in my collection either. It is very much along the lines of several other blushes that I have. I think I should just declutter the whole thing. I think I should just declutter the whole thing and just have done with it. Gosh, that surprises me a little bit. I didn't think I would be able to let go of it because I really do love this blush. But again, I can absolutely get this effect or something very similar with a number of other products in my collection. So yeah, we're letting that one go altogether. All right, what else do we have here? Let's take a look at my two Natasha Denona face palettes. Neither of these I'm getting rid of. Let's just, spoiler alert, these are both staying with me. This is the Glam Face Palette, and this is the Love Palette. The only product in here that I don't care for, the only one, is this blush here. It doesn't work for me at all. There's a white base in here that just makes this almost completely unworkable on me. There are some instances when I can get away with it just super light on the apples of the cheeks, but I would rather reach for this blush or really any other blush in my collection. I can't think of another blush in my collection that I wouldn't prefer to this one. I have actually considered on occasion just scraping everything out of this pan and repressing something else in it. And I might actually end up doing that. I really enjoy this color story here. I know that there were a lot of people who didn't love it. It was just a little too pink, but you know how I feel about pinks and purples. I love all of this. I also love all of this. This is a very neutral palette, but I just find it to be super easy, super travel friendly. These are magnetic, so they can be mixed and matched. I purchased them with the eye to doing that eventually. I have not yet done so, but I think that would be fun. I do really enjoy Natasha's formulas. I enjoy the convenience of a cheek and eye palette. Both of these I actually think I was able to purchase with a point discount. I think this one was from Sephora and this one was from Ulta. Both of them I purchased for under $40, which, to be perfectly honest, makes me love them even more. I love both of these palettes. Definitely hang on to them. Here is another product that I just haven't gotten the chance to play with as much as I want to. This was a Black Friday purchase, not this last Black Friday, but the one before that. So the Black Friday before I began panning. And it is another one of those palettes that I really kind of pushed aside in favor of older products that I was trying to pan this last year. And I need to love it a little bit more because let me tell you what it is. This is the Ofra collab with Samantha March called Life's a Draft. I love it. I love everything about it. This highlighter is maybe a little bit icier than I usually prefer, and the bronzer is a little bit more on the warm side, but it's all workable for me. This blush I find really pretty, and obviously these purples are 100% right up my alley. I have probably used this less than 10 times since I picked it up, and I definitely want to play with it a little bit more in this coming year. Now this is the BH Cosmetics Sun Sculpt Contour Palette in the shade Light. This has a bronzer. They call it a contour, but I feel like it's more of a bronzer. 2 blushes, a very kind of nude peachy one, which really isn't generally what I reach for. Then a deeper peachy shade. I usually reach for this blush over this one. And then a really pretty gold highlight. I have actually really enjoyed this palette. I think this is another one I picked up at TJ Maxx when there were a lot of BH Cosmetics products being liquidated through the discount stores. So I got this at a very good price, but I don't know if I need to hang on to this one because there's nothing in here that I really love that I can't get a better version of in here. So this is my Cali Contour palette from Smashbox. It has a couple of shimmery highlights. It has a blush that honestly I think I prefer over either of these 2 blushes here. It has a very, very nice bronzer that I think is a little bit more on the neutral side, and then a contour that actually is a proper contour for me. And then it has what is, for me, this is a matte highlight. There's just nothing that this does that this doesn't do for me better. The only thing this doesn't have that this has is this is a much more blinding highlight, whereas I find these highlights here to be much more subtle. But I don't know, I think I prefer it. I think I prefer it. So because of that, this is a nice palette. I don't dislike this palette at all, and I would have 100% be hanging on to it if I didn't have this one. But I just feel like this palette does everything this does, but it does it better. I think I'm gonna go ahead and pass this one on to someone else, and I'm gonna hang on to this one. I really do enjoy this Cali Contour. I enjoy every single product in here, every single one. So passing this one on, keeping this one. All right, we are down to my last 4 palettes. This is the Blend Bunny Forget Me Not palette. The Natasha Denona Glam Face palette is my newest one, but I think this is my second newest face palette. I think I reviewed this pretty thoroughly in a monthly roundup when I purchased this. I really enjoy this whole palette. One of the big criticisms that I heard about this palette was that it was just very gray, and I agree with that. It is incredibly gray. So if you have a tendency to find things that look very ashy on you, this may not be the best choice for you. But for someone like me who actually has a lot of gray in my skin tone, this is perfect. I really enjoy this whole thing. I enjoy it for the cheeks. I enjoy it for the eyes. I can use some of these shades in my brows. There are some things that if I was the one that had created this palette, there are a few things that I'd probably tweak. I would want a deeper pink here. I would want a more proper yellow, simply because that would add more versatility to some of these other shades by allowing me to mix those in and give them different undertones. But I have really, really enjoyed this palette over this last year. I had it in a project, used the heck out of it, still really, really enjoying it. I think the only complaint that I have about this one is this is a beautiful companion palette, but it's enormous. I mean, can we really call it companion palette if it's this big? I couldn't possibly travel with this thing. And the size makes it a little frustrating to store, but this is pretty much along the lines of what Blend Bunny tends to do. And as far as the products inside go, I really have enjoyed this palette. Okay, this one here. I think I also bought this one for the packaging for similar reasons that I bought that little Natasha Denona duo. I just love the glitter. I love the glitter. I don't know that I need this though. This is the Becca Champagne, let's see, Becca Pop Goes the Glow Champagne Pop Fat Face and Eye Palette. I haven't used much of these eyeshadows here. I bought it mostly for the champagne pop that was going on here, but do you see this? Honestly, I think I could just pop this out, stick it in a magnetic palette or a empty compact, and be perfectly happy just getting rid of the rest of them. So this isn't a full declutter. It is just basically me turning this palette into a single, because this champagne pop highlighter, it is a very pretty highlighter. I just don't know if it deserved to take the internet by storm the way it did at the time. Anyway, because it is pretty and I do enjoy it, I'm going to keep this one as a single, and I'm going to declutter the rest of this palette because I really don't get any use out of these at all. So this is all we have left. These are 2 palettes that I picked up around the same time, either at a TJ Maxx or Marshalls, and these were mostly out of curiosity. I did not have anything from Wander Beauty at the time, and I was just curious. Likewise, Buxom makes my favorite lip gloss formula of all time, but I had never tried any of their powder products. So now this Wander Beauty palette is actually very pretty. It's a very simple palette. There's not a whole lot of variation or nuance in this palette. You go into any shadow in this palette and you're gonna get a look that looks exactly the same as any other combination that you're gonna be able to make. Just a very standard kind of bronzy look that I do find very flattering in the summertime, but this is one look. It doesn't matter what combination of these shadows that you try, it's gonna look the same no matter what you do. I don't find myself reaching for it very often. I do really enjoy this blush. It is a very pretty blush, very soft, slightly warm pink blush, really, really pretty highlight. My favorite way to use these is to blend the 2 of them together to make a softer, more luminescent blush. As pretty as this is, it isn't something that I reach for terribly often, and so I'm gonna go ahead and pass this one on. And then there was one. This is my Buxom Tiki Bar Eye and Cheek palette. It has 6 eyeshadows, a highlighter, and a blush. As far as the eyeshadows go, these are perfectly nice eyeshadows. They're not the most amazing eyeshadows that I have ever experienced. They're definitely not the worst. They are perfectly fine. However, I have never, not even once, reached into this palette specifically for the eyeshadows. The color story is nice. The formula is nice. It always looks nice. I also have never reached into it specifically for this highlight. This is the Golden Hour highlight. It is a very strong highlight with, it's like a champagne with a lot of white base is what this one ends up being. But this blush is special. There is something just special about this blush. To me, this is the perfect summer blush. Kind of got that, I don't know, bronzer vibe. It feels like a blush and a bronzer that has been mixed together. And there is, I know it looks a little bit like a bruise on my arm right now, but there is something about this particular blush on my summer skin tone that is just divine. And I don't have anything else like it in my collection. And because of that, I don't think I can ever give up this palette. Not because the eyeshadows are amazing, not because I'm crazy about this highlighter, but because that is just a very unique blush in my collection. It is that perfect balance between bronzy and blushy, and I love it. It's gorgeous. It is just bronzy goddess goals in the summertime. I just love this blush. And so yeah, I'm gonna keep this entire palette that I feel pretty indifferent about for this one product here. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. These eyeshadows are perfectly fine. This highlighter probably is a little bit more blinding than I prefer, but it's a good inner corner highlight, this one. This blush though, I cannot let go of it. It is a gorgeous blush. For me, it is worth keeping this entire palette just for that one product. I almost forgot this monster of a face palette. I'm not sure how I missed it. It's enormous. This is the Physicians Formula Ultimate Muru Muru Butter Collection. This was a limited edition face palette that has been kind of languishing on my shelf for a while. I admit this thing is so enormous that I overlook it because of its size. My eyes go right past it and I don't even register it as makeup. It looks like it could be a board game or something. I don't know. But this is a collection of all of the butter products that Physicians Formula had at the time. I don't know how current that is to what their collection is now. But in here, oh my gosh, the scent, the smell. Now this is all of their bronzers. So we have some shimmery ones, we have some matte ones in various tones. I find most of these to be pretty flattering on my skin tone. This one is a little bit deep for me and these ones a little bit fair for me, but I find that if I mix the two, I can usually get something that works on my skin. Usually though, I'm going in with some combination of these 3 over here. Just for fun, we're just gonna swatch. So those are the top 2. Even on my winter skin tone, they're not showing up particularly well. So these are mixing shades for me mostly. That one is a little bit deeper, but is a little bit too yellow for me. This is where it starts to look more right on my skin. This one is the shimmery tone. I don't like to wear this one on its own because it's just a little bit too reflective. These ones are both nice, although this one it starts to get a little too deep for me. And then this is the last one. Definitely too deep on its own, but because all of these pans are here together, I find it very, very easy to just mix these into something that looks flattering on my skin tone. Then we have these eyeshadows, and I have never really thought of Physicians Formula as a amazing eyeshadow brand, but I do find these eyeshadows, both the mattes and the shimmers, to be buttery and delicious. Oh my gosh, this one did not swatch very well. However, I have been pleased with it on the eyes. I love this dusty purple tone. This one is also one of my favorites here, this shimmer here. And then I also really enjoy this green one. That's actually a killer eye look right there. Look at that. I could totally make that work. I think these are the only Physicians Formula eyeshadows I've ever owned or used, but these are lovely. Obviously, you can still see the embossing on all of these, so I haven't used them a ton. I was actually considering rolling some of these products in to my 25 in 2025. Then these slide aside to reveal the next layer, which is blushes and highlighters. I don't particularly care for these highlighters. They're a little bit on the sparkly metallic side for me personally, and they're very, very intense and very pigmented. Let me show you. See that? I feel like those seem like cream eyeshadows to me, but the formula is not really meant for the eyes, so I find they can be a little bit creasy. Now the blushes are a completely different story. I find these to be soft and creamy and blendable. They're really pretty. I don't know if I would, they're not matte blushes, but I don't know if I would necessarily call them glowy either. They just have a really soft luminescence to them. They're very flattering on the skin. Really enjoy these blushes. Then on this level, you have a little flip up mirror that I can never, there we go. Little flip up mirror. And then a bunch of lip products that I just don't use. I think this is probably the only one that I would consider. There are very few instances where I have enjoyed a lip color from a pan like this. Color-wise, these two might be the only two that I would consider, these two here. But they're a little bit transparent and they're just a little sticky. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of these lip products. Also not a huge fan of these highlighters, but the bronzers, the blushes, and the eyeshadows alone would be worth the price of this entire palette. And I really feel like I need to get more use out of this. This definitely does get overlooked in my collection. So yeah, I'm thinking about rolling some of these products into my 25 in 2025. See if I can hit pan on a few of them. Because yeah, makeup doesn't last forever. And there really are some very nice products in here that I would love to get a little bit more use on. Okay, I have to admit, I did not expect to be getting rid of this many face palettes. I love my face palettes. So we have 6 here that we are decluttering. I'm still going to consider this one a declutter, even though it's not reducing the number of products in my collection at all, because the highlighter in it is simply becoming a single. But I'm going to go ahead and still count that as a declutter anyway. I feel like I deserve the credit for at least being able to get rid of part of it. It'll definitely be easier to store. It will take up less space and probably will have more likelihood of being used than it would if I kept the entire palette. So we have 6 products going out, 1 product going into my collection as a single, and that gives us including the Pat McGrath trio that I cannot locate at the moment. That gives us 17 base palettes staying in our collection. That means my initial count was wrong. My initial count, I told you at the beginning of the video, I had 25. Apparently I had 26. So we are decluttering 6 and hanging on to 17. That is the final count. I understand this was not a wildly cutthroat declutter here, but to be perfectly honest, it's a lot better than I thought I would do. I thought I might be able to get rid of 2, maybe 3 palettes on the outside, and we have 6. So I'm actually really proud of myself for that. Is this a more manageable number of face palettes? No, this is not manageable in the least. but it's the best I can do for now. There are some products here that I could see possibly leaving my collection over the next year, maybe at my next declutter. This one, I'm gonna have to think long and hard about whether or not I want to hang on to this one. I will see if I get any more use out of it over the coming year, and that will kind of inform whether or not it's gonna stay in my collection. But yeah, I'm actually pretty proud of being able to get rid of as many as I have. And that is it for my face palettes. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.